This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Hot Takes, the show where I take your hot takes from the comment sections of the videos of the week and react to them here in video format. With the Browns going through and firing Alex Van Pelt, there's been a lot of interesting takes in Browns world. So let's just jump into it. First thing we're going to see is the comments from the Browns fired their offensive coordinator video. First comment here is from Jay, and Jay says, this is the Browns saying we have to get a Watson guy in here to make this work no matter what. I don't think it's exclusively that. Is that part of the solution? Sure, right? Like, I think that's part of what they want. I also think this is about evolving the offense and not specifically about making it something that Watson used to do. The Browns want to evolve the offense, and they also want Deshaun Watson to evolve with that offense. I don't think their solution is as simple as let's go back to 2020 and do something that Deshaun used to do in 2020. It's like, hey, let's find people who can be collaborators with us and kind of help us push this offense forward, because right now we just didn't have enough voices in the room with enough power to be able to make that change. So I wouldn't look at this as they're hiring Watson's guy. I think that's a flawed way to look at it. I think they're looking at this to try to add elements to the offense that weren't there, fix the run game, things like that. The next comment comes from Ryan, who says, I love this move. It also gives us an opportunity to put fresh tape with the new offensive coordinator to change the scheme instead of seeing what we've been doing since Stefanski got here. Hope teams will only have the prior games for next season to see what we're doing. Like the Ravens had to switch from Monken. We'll have a fresh look. I hope we have added pre-snap movements as well as post-snap backfield routes that makes everything look similar, but also different because of added wrinkles and everything else. All right. So again, I do think that this is something that is necessary when you're in a division with as much continuity as the AFC North. The Browns, the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Steelers all haven't fired a coach in like 4 or 5 years. They're the only division in the NFL with that track record. I mean, like Kevin Stefanski is still the newest coach to the division. He got hired in 2020. So when you have that much continuity, when you know you're going to be preparing versus these 4 teams, you kind of do need to switch it up at coordinator. And we've seen the teams that had the most stability and the most success with that stability, the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've been through multiple coordinators. I mean, like almost every other year, they're going through different coordinators on both sides of the ball because they need to change things up and stay fresh because of the continuity in the division. So yeah, this is just the Browns adapting to the environment around them and doing what other AFC North teams have done. As far as that offensive coordinator comes here to bring, like I know I'm trying during this process to stay away from the buzzwords, right? Because I think that the buzzwords can get us in trouble. What I mean by buzzwords is we'll say stuff like we need pre-snap motion, or we need, we need RPO and all of this. And they're hot buzzwords, but like unless we explain why we feel like that is necessary to the offense, it ends up just being some shit we saying. So I'm trying to make sure that my hopes for the new offensive coordinator aren't too buzzwordy. Like that, I have reasons on why I think this, right? The run game needs to improve because down the stretch of this season, they couldn't figure out anything, and that's just not acceptable. The passing game, I think that they need to find ways to open things up downfield more often. And if that includes pre-snap motion, if that includes RPOs, then so be it. But the overall goal is they want to create more explosive plays out of shotgun with Deshaun Watson throwing the football. However that happens, it happens. I don't want to be in a situation where the Browns are getting explosive plays out of shotgun, but I'm sitting here and complaining about it because they're not doing something arbitrary like pre-snap motion or something else. They figure out a different way to do it. That's fine. I'm not too strict on how they have to do it as long as the job gets done. And what we know is that they want this offense to be a bit more explosive under Watson, and a bit more dangerous, and a bit more modern. And the way that you accomplish that is through results, not necessarily by arbitrarily having these things and adding them to a checklist. So I want to be careful that I don't fall into the buzzword trap when it comes to looking for these offensive coordinators or, talking about this to the audience. Jerry Stevens says, hey, I'm glad to see you understand that Watson's future depends on his performance. So many sports talk guys say they have to stay with him because of what they gave up to get him. Haslam, DePodesta, and Stefanski are way too smart to fall for what is known as the sunk cost fallacy. What someone is willing to pay for something can't be charged. Okay, yeah, I know what the sunk cost fallacy is. They will keep or move on from Watson based on the current performance and nothing else. I mean, it's funny to me too that people have fallen into this like sunk cost fallacy that the Browns are going to they must stick with Deshaun Watson no matter what, given what they gave up for him, when that's the same argument they use to why the Browns wouldn't even consider going after Deshaun Watson. And when they had Baker Mayfield, it's because they've already committed so much to Baker Mayfield. How could they? And it's just ultimate. And they already had given Baker his 5th-year option too at that point too. So ultimately, this is just what it is in the NFL. And if you're a good team, you gave them the money, you trade that draft picks. That's all in the past. What matters now is Watson's performance. And if Watson can play well enough at the quarterback position to get to where you need to get to, that's simply all that matters. Can Watson play well enough at that quarterback position to get you to where you need to get to? Now, the part of this that I do feel like is kind of getting ignored or easily forgotten is that we felt like we were at this point when Watson went out. And I know people are like, well, you're putting a lot of stock into the last 2 quarters of the Ravens game. It's not the last 2 quarters of the Ravens game that make me say this. It's the overall body of work that he put together in 5 games this season. He had 1 bad game, but 4 performances where you felt like, hey, you can definitely go pretty far, reach your goals with this level of quarterback play. Now, did it exceed expectations? No. Was it at whatever mythical bar that people set for a $230 million quarterback? No, he wasn't throwing for 300 yards every week and 3 touchdowns. He wasn't one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think you're lying to yourself and to anybody you talk to if you tell me that you don't think the Browns could play winning football with Deshaun Watson, because we saw them play winning football versus good teams with Deshaun Watson this year. And then you look at point differential. He was the quarterback that you had the highest point differential with. He was the quarterback you were most easily able to beat bad teams with. He was the quarterback that you were able to beat good teams with. While I think a lot is lost in how people feel about certain people and how that paints the picture of what they want to believe is the situation on the field. And the situation with Deshaun Watson is cloudy. And what I mean by cloudy is that it's not clear on either side what it's going to be. It's not clear if it's going to be a sunny day. It's not clear if it's going to rain. It's just up in the air. We don't know. We've seen evidence of both, and sufficient enough evidence of both, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's my whole thing. Is just we got to figure out what you have in Deshaun Watson before you make any determinations or decisions on it. And right now, the Browns are trying to figure out what they have, and if they feel like they don't have enough at the quarterback position to get this done, they're going to make a move just like they did a couple years ago to find somebody who they feel like can. Deep CUP Toju says, let's see if Kevin is secure enough to bring in a solid offensive coordinator that won't take a backseat. Now, I've seen these type of comments, and I'm sorry, DCUP. I know you're a consistent viewer and commenter on this channel, but I'm going to have to call bullshit on this kind of commentary, to be honest with you. And the reason I'm calling bullshit on it is y'all did this last year. Y'all did this last year with Kevin. Oh, let's see if Kevin's secure enough to bring in an experienced defensive coordinator. I bet he won't do that. I bet his ego won't allow him to. And you guys were flat out wrong. And instead of acknowledging how wrong you were on this kind of rhetoric and calling bullshit on it when it crosses your mind, you just regurgitated the same bullshit that y'all was regurgitating last year. It was unfounded last year. It's even more unfounded this year. Kev's probably going to bring in the offensive coordinator that he sees fit to do the job. The same way he did on defense. Like, I'm sorry, but this kind of rhetoric, like, I know you're a loyal viewer, and I hope you continue to come by, even though me and you disagree on this, but this is just bullshit. Pure bullshit. I'm sorry. Like, it's based on all conjecture and what you think Kevin Stefanski's like, and you got no proof of any of that. Like, the only proof is that he hired somebody who had a lot of experience for defensive coordinator last year. But somehow you're coming here from the position of, let's see if he's secure enough. He proved that last year. Yeah, I'm calling bullshit on this kind of commentary, to be honest with you. That's bullshit. All right. The Browns' next offensive coordinator. This video was just targeting who the Browns could look at, some traits. More importantly, the traits of the offensive coordinators the Browns might look at. First comment comes from Jason, who says, I would love a video where you break down what position coaches' actual responsibilities are. When I see a guy get fired or hired, I might be able to look at his body of work and determine. Here's the thing about that, man. You're never going to be able to get a good grasp on that because every workplace, every team is different. Sometimes in some places, this position coach is important. Hell, sometimes it could be the same place, but a different year. The wide receiver coach isn't as important this year, right? But maybe in another year, the wide receiver coach plays a super important role. The main point I want to come down to is that if you're trying to find these clear lines of responsibility and blame when it comes to what is successful with the team and what's not, and who is successful for that, there's just no good way of figuring that out. In general, we kind of know the broad rules, right? The wide receiver coach is somewhat in part in charge of the wide receivers. The quarterbacks coach has some control over the quarterbacks, but then all these other positions kind of interact with another, and it's just, there's no clean way to really figure that out. So, you just got to trust it's a collaborative process and that the people who are making these decisions kind of know what they're doing. Because from the outside looking in, it's just impossible to discern which coach is actually doing a good job and which is not. Now, if you get like a player or a group of players saying that, hey, this coach has to go or something like that, or if a coach is like randomly, like, I'll tell you this, position coaches usually don't get fired for no reason, right? Like, if a coach gets fired, a position coach gets fired, it's usually for a reason. I can't say the same is true for position coaches getting promoted, because sometimes position coaches do get promoted for no good reason. But most of the time, position coaches don't get fired for no reason. Now, whether that's a good reason or not, it's debatable, but usually there's a reason the team gets rid of a position coach. But that's the best I could do to answer that. Michael says, great video, Q. You are by far the best on Browns YouTube. Appreciate that. Honestly, although Bieniemy seems like he might be a bit above the Browns' pay grade, considering he'll probably be at least interviewed for a head coaching position, the fact that the Browns fired Stump almost makes me think that they may have already been talking to him and that he might want to bring in his own guy to coach running backs. That's probably extremely wishful thinking on my part, but what I can say is I'm a Browns fan regardless. I'm excited for a new voice. You know, I keep thinking about this, and the more I think about this, I think that the Browns are probably leaning in bringing in somebody to be a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator and sharing those responsibilities rather than just like a straight up new offensive coordinator. Like, I think that's why they got rid of Stump and why Alex Van Pelt agreed to come out of his contract. The reason why I think they got rid of Stump is because they want to bring in a run game coordinator and change up how they run the ball. Stump is the current running backs coach. He had to go. The reason I think that Van Pelt decided to step down is because they wanted to bring in a run game coordinator. He didn't want to step down to passing game coordinator. He made a professional move there and decided to step down and try to catch on as an offensive coordinator somewhere else. And I think that might be some of the lines of logic here for the Cleveland Browns and why guys made the decisions that they did. But I think one of the things is true is that they really do want to improve this run game and make sure that just because Nick Chubb goes now, they can still run the ball regardless of that. So that's something that I think that they're really going to be focused on. And I think Stump had to go in order for them to do it because they weren't going to promote Stump, the run game coordinator. And if your problem was the run game, you can't promote the dude that was in charge of it to fix it, right? Like, that's just not how it works. So I think that's why they did that. Music by Merlin says Kevin's got to give up the playbook before any offensive coordinator takes a job. I really don't think this is true. If Kev wants to give up the playbook and he wants to offer that might help things. But if they want to fill this role with somebody different, then I think that's fine too. Again, like the same way I wasn't trying to be fixated on names on the defensive coordinator search is the same way I'm not trying to be fixated by names on the offensive coordinator search. Like, the Browns are looking for traits, experience, and people to bring in new perspectives on the offensive side of the ball. Those guys could be former offensive coordinators that we all know about. Those guys could be guys that we don't know about that are position coaches right now that would be happy to become an offensive coordinator and get that promotion. There are multiple ways that the Browns can find a way to fill this role. And again, I'll ask everybody who's so thirsty for Kevin to give up the play calling, are you sure it's going to be better if you give it to somebody who's never done it before? Because Kev's not bad at play calling. Like, it's far down on the list of things I actually think are a problem with the Cleveland Browns is play calling. If Kev gives up play calling, it's got to be to somebody that he knows he's not going to want to take it from. And if you don't bring in somebody that experience, and if the goal isn't to bring in somebody that experience, the goal is to bring in different perspectives so you can have a better collaboration on this process, then I really don't think that it matters if he gives up play calling or not. I think people just make too big of a deal about that kind of stuff. My guy AME says, I saw an infographic today on the 33rd team, and they showed that all the offense in the playoffs, they run out of the gun. Detroit being at least 73% snaps out of shotgun. Baltimore running 92. Historically, the past 3 years, Cleveland has run shotgun. They're the bottom 5 in the league. And yeah, I think this is why they're deciding to make these moves, especially right now, is that they want to become more comfortable throwing the ball, running the and running the offense out of shotgun. And that was not an area of expertise for Alex Van Pelt, nor is it an area of expertise for Kevin Stefanski. And if Kevin wants to grow in that area, he knows that he needs to bring in people who are more familiar with that style of football to join in on the collaboration process that is him, Deshaun Watson, the quarterback coach, and whoever the offensive game or pass game coordinator will be. But I think they want to get better at running the offense out of shotgun. And they made a decision to find guys and add those guys to positions of power to the team that are a little bit more familiar with running the ball and throwing the ball out of shotgun. And I also think that they saw the success that Drew Petzing had as an offensive coordinator in Arizona and thought to themselves, okay, who else are we not getting the most out of right now because we're kind of stuck in our ways offensively? I think the move was to just kind of get them out of their own way before it becomes a massive problem, which is a good decision. So thank you for that comment. The Browns should stay away from these two. These were offensive coordinators that I didn't want the Browns to go after. Brad says literally in the middle of this video, I got an ESPN notification that Ohio State hired Bill O'Brien. Now, look, I don't think Bill O'Brien's the greatest hire for Ohio State. And I will say this, though. I know there's going to be a lot of doom and gloom over Bill O'Brien. I'm not going to call it a good hire. I think people who are calling it a good hire, their standards have lowered significantly. For Ohio State, Bill O'Brien is not a good hire. It's a wait and see hire, but I will add this little drop of optimism if you are an Ohio State fan. Bill O'Brien, the reason I didn't want him for the Browns were pretty specific to his work in the NFL being lackluster, in my opinion, especially recently, and the fact that he doesn't have a great relationship with Deshaun Watson. Right. Those two things made me feel like, yeah, you can't bring in Bill O'Brien and think that shit's going to just rock with the Browns. Like, it's a bad fit. Now, for Ohio State, maybe Bill O'Brien might be somebody who can help you out. I think where his value will be for Ohio State, if you're looking for an optimistic view of this, which, again, I'm not the most optimistic on Bill O'Brien at Ohio State, but I'll provide you some optimistic view of this. Bill O'Brien, if he is one thing, he's an experienced head football coach. And Ryan Day is pretty bad at that kind of stuff, like just the experienced head football coach stuff. So maybe Bill O'Brien's experience helps Ryan Day there, and when he's offensive coordinator for them. But yeah, that's the best I got for you, Ohio State fans. Other than that, I can understand your disappointment in that hire. And I know Ohio State fans are trying some Ohio State fans who just believe in that Ohio State can never do wrong kind of stuff want to believe that there's no such thing as a bad hire that Ohio State can do. And look, I'm not saying it's a bad hire, but it is a wait and see hire. You can't declare this anything. This ain't like a home run. But if it turns out to be good, then it's going to be good. And if it turns out to be bad, then it's not going to be that shocking. That's kind of what it is. But yeah, my issues with Bill O'Brien and why I didn't want him in the Cleveland Browns uniform had a lot to do with his relationship with Deshaun Watson that seemed to have fallen apart in Houston. I was seeing Cliff Kingsbury tied to the Bears, hearing Rich Eisen praise about the table for him. I feel like Mugatu hearing all of this, man, is a black eye on the Cardinals franchise and should not see a leadership position in the NFL ever for all the reasons you stated. Whatever agent has been working for him. Here's the thing I just don't understand how Cliff Kingsbury has maintained a good reputation despite all of his work being lackluster. Bodies, years, hundreds of games of evidence of this. And we keep acting like he's going to fix something, right? Cliff Kingsbury trying to get a job with the Bears due to his connection with Caleb Williams is hilarious to me because he's just a hanger on. Right? He's an offensive assistant at USC. And by the way, he was an offensive assistant at USC in the worst year of Caleb Williams' college football career. And somehow he is convincing the Bears that he's the offensive mind you need to bring to bring in Caleb Williams. It sounds stupid to me. Nothing about this sounds good. And again, the only thing I ever hear Cliff Kingsbury get credit for is the fact that he happened to be the dude that lucked into recruiting Pat Mahomes. He wasn't even the dude that got the most out of Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes won the MVP his first full year starting in the NFL. which indicates to me that he was really good at football his whole life, right? It didn't take him like 4 years to get good at this in the NFL. He got good at it the second he touched the field for an extended period. He was the best quarterback in football. That dude went 10th overall simply because he played with Cliff Kingsbury. If he played with any other coach, he would have been the number 1 overall pick, unquestioned, in a draft that had Myles Garrett. But because he played at Texas Tech, he went 10th. Hey, man, I don't know how many more times Cliff Kingsbury can spit in people's face and tell them it's raining and they believe it. But if he continues, like, hey, man, hats off to him, right? Hats off to him. I'm just saying, I think it's pretty obvious he's not good, but we let the Josh McDaniels thing happen like 4 different times. And before people were like, yeah, maybe he's not good. People also thought that Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be great with the Raiders this year, right? Like, people believed in that. Like, sometimes there are obvious schemes that seem obvious to me, or not schemes. There are obvious scams that seem obvious to me that some people are just blind to, for whatever reason. And Cliff Kingsbury is one of them. RJB says Browns hire Bill O'Brien as an OC. He's outstanding, and he already knows what works with Watson. Chubb is the running back he's always wanted. His issues were his GM. No, Bill O'Brien's issues were offensive related too. There was a lot of frustration with how that offense worked. They felt like the offense, Deshaun Watson and the Texans felt like Bill O'Brien kind of relied too much on Deshaun Watson to just kind of bail him out most of the time. The reason Deshaun's not as great in structure as we want him to be right now is because he had to work with Bill O'Brien, who kind of just relied on throwing this guy out of structure. So no, Bill O'Brien hasn't been an outstanding offensive coordinator. It's bullshit, to be honest with you. Like, he hasn't been an outstanding offensive coordinator literally anywhere he's been. The Penn State offenses he had weren't outstanding. The offenses in Houston weren't outstanding. And the offense this year in New England weren't outstanding. He's never been an outstanding offensive coordinator. That is pure garbage. But yeah, I wouldn't be a huge fan of Bill O'Brien for the Browns. I don't think him and Watson have a good relationship from what it seems. And 2, I don't think Watson really liked playing in that system. Like, I think he felt like there was more that they can get out of him. And just because Watson hasn't played well doesn't mean that you just completely give up and just go back to what worked 2 years ago. You got to try to bring some of that in by also evolving it into what 2023 NFL is. And that's another thing Bill O'Brien hasn't shown much of an aptitude for being able to do, which is adapt to the modern NFL landscape at all. So I'm all out on Bill O'Brien, to be honest with you. User says, what exactly changed for Deshaun? Is it the offensive scheme, his athleticism, his accuracy? I think it's a combination of just comfort. He hasn't played a lot. He's played 11 games in the last 3 years. That's probably what's changed for Deshaun Watson. And he needs to play more consistently and get these games stacked up in order to kind of just be himself again on the football field. The question is, will he ever be able to stay healthy for the amount of time necessary for him to kind of get comfortable again? Because that's been the main issue for him. But yeah, I mean, it's smack dab in the face. He's played 11 games for the Cleveland Browns in 2 years. That's the problem. But that's it for, one more. Josh McDaniels is available. No mention. Josh McDaniels, no, don't want the Browns to get him. No, I thought that one. I don't even think people were considering Josh McDaniels at this point. Like, I think people have finally caught on to that he's a scam. But that's it for the hot takes portion of the week. Thank you for dropping those comments all week. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you click subscribe. Peace.